Imagine standing in the pit lane of a major race. Engines roar like thunder. Suddenly, two monsters emerge. On one side, the Ford 427 SOHC Cammer, cutting edge, banned before it could prove itself. On the other, the Chrysler 426 Hemi, a symbol of raw power that ruled every track it touched. They were never allowed to clash head-to-head in NASCAR. But in the world of drag racing, where rules are fewer, they finally met. And when they did, all hell broke loose. This video isn't just about two engines. It's about an era when automakers didn't just compete for sales. They built weapons of speed. A time when every car told a story, every engine carried a mission. So, between the Cammer and the Hemi, who was the real king? And was the Cammer robbed of its glory? Let's uncover the shocking truth behind this legendary showdown. In the 1960s, America wasn't just buzzing with rock and roll or political protests. In the world of cars, a quieter but fiercer conflict was brewing. The horsepower war. No tanks, no bullets, just massive engines, ambitious blueprints, and the pride of rival car makers. Racing wasn't just a sport. It was a battlefield for engineering supremacy. If a car won on Sunday, people lined up to buy it on Monday. Win on Sunday, sell on Monday. That phrase became gospel, fueling every bolt and piston. Ford and Chrysler, the titans of Detroit, weren't content with second place. They didn't just want to win, they wanted to crush the competition. And to do that, they needed engines unlike anything the world had ever seen. In 1964, Daytona became a nightmare for Ford. The newly unveiled Chrysler 426 Hemi dominated the podium. Ford was left behind, in smoke, in shame, and in burning determination. Ford knew they had to strike back, but they couldn't just copy the Hemi. They needed a different kind of weapon, something radical enough to reset the game. In secret labs, Ford's engineers began crafting what would later be known as the 427 SOHC Cammer. Unlike most engines with pushrod designs, the Cammer used overhead camshafts, a technological leap. They packed it with aluminum heads, massive valves, and high compression ratios. But before the Cammer could hit a NASCAR track, Ford had to get it approved. So they asked, and NASCAR said, no. That no didn't just crush Ford's hopes, it shifted all eyes to Chrysler, where another engine with an unexpected origin was ready to take over. The 426 Hemi. Few know that the Hemi wasn't born on the racetrack, but on the battlefield. The hemispherical combustion chamber design first appeared in early 20th century Europe. After World War II, Chrysler brought the idea home and tested it for military use. They built engines for tanks, even aircraft. That was the Hemi's foundation, built to handle extreme loads, to survive under pressure. When Chrysler brought that design to racing, they didn't just create an engine, they built a weapon of war on wheels. And in 1964, at Daytona, the 426 Hemi proved exactly that. But that victory sparked a new chapter, one filled with challenges for both Chrysler and Ford. Right after that shocking victory, NASCAR changed the game. To compete, automakers now had to put their race engines into street cars, a challenge that sent Ford and Chrysler down completely different paths. Ford, faced with the overly complex Cammer, knew it was nearly impossible to tame it. With its OHC layout, 6-foot timing chain, and high compression, it simply wasn't made for daily driving. So they shelved it and returned to the safer 427 wedge engine. Meanwhile, Chrysler decided to soften its beast. They tuned the 426 Hemi into a more street-friendly version, that still carried the spirit of the original. By 1966, you could walk into a Dodge or Plymouth dealership and buy a Hemi-powered car, legal, brutal, and ready for battle. Two companies, two strategies. But in the end, it all came down to one question. Which of these machines was truly more powerful? To find that answer, we have to start where every engineering battle begins, on the blueprint, in the specs, and deep in the design. The Ford 427 SOHC Cammer was a textbook case of futuristic engineering. It kept the familiar 427 FE block, but ditched the old pushrod system for single overhead camshafts, one on each head. Paired with aluminum heads, massive valves, dual springs, and hemispherical chambers, it felt like a science project unleashed on the racetrack. The top-tier version, with dual Holley 780 cubic feet per minute carbs, made a staggering 658 horsepower on race fuel. Even the lighter single-carb version pushed 616 horsepower. Wild numbers for the 1960s. The 426 Hemi played a different game. Its street version made 425 horsepower with dual Carter 625 cubic feet per minute carbs. But its strength wasn't in raw numbers. It was in endurance and reliability. Thick block, domed pistons, simple but refined layout. The Hemi was ready to fight, day in and day out. The Cammer was a brilliant madman. The Hemi was a relentless warrior. But behind those numbers lies a world of mechanical complexity and risk. And to truly understand the difference, we need to pop the hood and take a closer look inside. Let's start with the Cammer, a machine that amazed onlookers but kept engineers up at night. Ford began with the 427 FE side oiler block and did something unheard of in American engines at the time. Mounted single overhead camshafts on top of each cylinder head, replacing the traditional pushrod setup. This allowed for more precise valve control at high RPMs, less delay, and higher efficiency. Aluminum heads, massive valves, dual springs, and sodium-filled exhaust valves for better cooling. The Cammer was like a Formula One engine trapped inside a dragster's body. But it came at a cost. Ford had to use a 6-foot-long timing chain, prone to stretching at high revs. When it did, timing would drift, forcing engineers to adjust one camshaft to compensate. They nicknamed it the 90-day wonder because the entire project came together in under 3 months. The Cammer embodied speed in both design and performance. But that made it anything but tame. If the Cammer was a groundbreaking concept, then the 426 Hemi was the pinnacle of refined tradition. No frills, no need for futuristic tech. The Hemi stuck with a classic pushrod design, but refined it to near perfection. One camshaft sat inside the block, operating valves through pushrods and rocker arms. It might sound old-fashioned, but Chrysler turned simplicity into a deadly advantage. Wide cylinder heads, hemispherical chambers, 2 big valves, one intake, one exhaust, and a centrally placed spark plug. This design allowed for cooler, more even combustion, reducing the risk of detonation and boosting efficiency. Domed pistons raised compression without sacrificing stability. The engine block was cast thick, with cleverly routed oil passages that ensured reliable lubrication at high RPMs. Combined with precise machining and tough internals, the Hemi became a true tank, able to power through run after run without ever popping the hood. With the Cammer, Ford chose innovation and risk. With the Hemi, Chrysler chose refinement and reliability. Both were powerful, but in entirely different ways. That contrast set the stage for a fascinating technical showdown, where precision battled practicality and cutting edge met old-school toughness. The Cammer was a symbol of unlimited engineering ambition. Overhead cams, complex valve systems, and ultra-high tolerances, all pushing for massive power and sky-high RPMs. But to unlock that potential, you needed skill, money, and time. The Hemi was simpler, but never soft. A traditional layout, yes, but built to last. Easy to maintain, easy to install. With the Hemi, you just fired it up, and it would fight to the finish. And when the rules changed, each engine found its own stage to show what it could do. One was banned. The other was free to roar. The Cammer, though blocked from NASCAR, refused to stay silent. It found another arena, the drag strip, where rules were fewer and power meant everything. Ford moved fast. They shipped Cammer engines to private races across the US, from California to Michigan. Soon, modified Mustangs appeared with stretched bodies, giant rear tires, and minimal weight. These were the early forms of what we now know as funny cars. Though the Cammer was insanely powerful, it had weaknesses, especially under supercharging and nitro fuel. Connecting rods often failed, but racers adapted. They switched to Mickey Thompson aluminum rods, upgraded oiling systems, and gradually, the Cammer became more reliable. Names like Sneaky Pete Robinson, Ohio George, and other legends used the Cammer to set records, win races, and put Ford back on the performance map. While the Cammer was still proving itself on the drag strip, the 426 Hemi was doing something simpler: winning. As early as 1964, the Hemi began dominating NHRA Superstock classes. For 3 straight years, 1964 to 1966, Dodge and Plymouth Hemi-powered cars swept the leaderboards. Top racers like Richard Petty, Sox and Martin, and Don Prudhomme all chose the Hemi. What made the Hemi special wasn't just horsepower, it was its ability to withstand brutal punishment, round after round, without major rebuilds. With a thick casting, excellent oiling, and optimized chamber design, the Hemi was like a tank with a racing heart. Chrysler didn't just dominate the drag strip, they turned the Hemi into a street legend. From Barracudas to Chargers, cars rolling out with Hemi stamped on the fender became the dream of a generation. The Hemi had proven its power not just on the strip, but on the street as well. But the place where it all began, NASCAR, was still the ultimate battlefield for the crown. And as both engines turned toward NASCAR, where reputations are made or broken, the Cammer and the Hemi entered the final chapter of their battle. Ford had high hopes that the Cammer could rewrite the NASCAR narrative. In 1966, it was approved, but only with harsh restrictions: full-size cars only, a smaller carburetor, and an added 430 pounds of ballast. It was essentially a death sentence. Unable to compete, Ford withdrew. The Cammer's NASCAR dream ended before it could begin. Meanwhile, the Hemi got the green light, and Chrysler took full advantage. From 1966 on, the Hemi dominated, powering legends like Richard Petty and David Pearson to championships. NASCAR even changed the rules just to hold the Hemi back. By the early 1970s, emissions laws and technical changes ended the golden era for both engines. But if NASCAR was a kingdom, then for that shining moment, the Hemi wore the crown. NASCAR may have closed the door on both the Cammer and the Hemi, but their rivalry never truly ended, because their legacy isn't measured only by trophies, but by how they changed the game forever. The Cammer, with its ahead-of-its-time design, proved how far Ford was willing to go. It was never given a fair fight, yet one listened to its roar, and you'll understand why it became a legend among gearheads. The Hemi was different. It wasn't just allowed to race. It won everything in sight. On the track, on the street, in the American imagination, the Hemi became the symbol of an era where mechanical might ruled supreme. So who would you crown the true king? Cammer, the band genius, or Hemi, the conquering champion? Let us know in the comments below. And if you've enjoyed this journey, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell, because more legendary engine battles are on the way.